Thanks for ruining it for me. Hi, I'm Greg Gutfeld with KG, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and she carved a canoe out of a Lincoln log. Dana Perino, the 5. According to Newsbusters, a thing, in the last 3 months, broadcast news coverage of Donald Trump was 91% negative, which is shocking. There was 9% positive? I didn't see it. I've seen more favorable coverage of scurvy. According to the Media Research Center, Trump's got more airtime in his first 224 days in office than Obama did in his last 2 years on the job, which makes sense. Trump's a one-man band generating money and outrage, or rather, money for the outraged. Like MSNBC's Joy Reid, in an interview, she stated, "I've said to people that this is probably the greatest time to be a journalist and the worst time to be a human." Oh, dear, dear. Let's think about that. Reid, a journalist, said that this is probably the worst time to be a human. Where did she go to school? I kind of remember reading about the Dark Ages, the Black Death, the Mongols, Nazi concentration camps, the atrocities of the Aztecs, the famine in Ukraine, the Khmer Rouge, the Western Front during World War I, Japanese prison camps in World War II, the Soviet Union. Remember Siberia? You get the picture. Does Joy, as she forgets and insults hundreds of millions who died in the worst times ever? But hey, hysteria pays the bills. But I can say safely that the best time to be human is right now. The statistics show it. Far less poverty, decline in worldwide violence, vast improvements in hygiene, medicine, and technology. But I guess you can't say that when you live in a left-wing bubble where 91% is every single person you know, and everyone else you believe is Hitler. I don't know, Kimberly, 91% negative, that seems a little low to me. I think it's about 98%.
You thought it would bump it up,
Yeah.
plus or minus 3% margin of error,
Exactly.
something like that, 101% if you do
Yeah.
the math. Yeah, I don't know. It was quite interesting. So here's the problem. I think that the media obviously is very fixated on President Trump, and they're going to harbor and sort of like hype on anything that they feel is going to be negative publicity, press, etc. But he has a fractured relationship with them, right? I mean, he does. So for whatever reason you want to blame his side or blame the media side, it's a relationship that is in dire need of repair. So when you see something like this, they say, okay, well, this is to be expected. Look at this. This is what we've been telling you, and it reinforces their beliefs about him and what they would like to make sure that gets, put forward by everybody. It's the narrative that they embrace and enjoy and believe in. It's part of their ideology.
You know, Juan, as bad as you think Donald Trump is, and I know you think he's bad, 91%, that's what you call media bias, correct? You got to admit.
I don't know if it's media bias. By the way, I was listening to what you said and I was just taken by it because I thought you were right. I mean, you convinced me when you went through all the things that have happened in history, saying, oh, this is the worst time to be alive. It's so disappointing for Democrats, and I think some Republicans, if you look at the opinion polls, to have Trump in the White House. But to say this is the worst time to be alive, well, it's a little much.
It's a stretch.
A stretch. Thank you, KG. Yes. So, but I would say this. I think Trump dominates the news media and the coverage in a way we have never seen.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's ever been a president who's as media friendly or hostile, however, because he's fighting the press. He tweets out, slamming CNN and all the rest, fake news, bad reporters. He goes, so there's a lot of that. The second thing to say is he hasn't had a lot of success. If you think about the Russia scandal, Obamacare repeal, what happened in Charlottesville, the ongoing problems with North Korea that we'll discuss later in the show. And then, of course,
That's been a success, don't you think?
What, North Korea? I think we're under threat.
I mean, we're seeing a success. We're seeing
Well,
a deal.
let's hope.
Go ahead.
I'm all for it to be a success. I just don't think it's a success as yet. That's all I'm saying. So I think a lot of that generates news coverage that you could take as negative. What struck me about this report was it said 90%, maybe 80 or 90% of the voices talking about Trump are from Republicans. Republicans are pretty critical. I think Steve Bannon said he thinks the GOP establishment's out to get Donald Trump. And it may be reflected in the news coverage.
Well, Jesse, what do you make of all of this? What do you make of this poll? What do you think of Juan's tie?
The tie's good, the analysis stinks. What I would say is that there are many reasons that the press is so hostile to the president. It's not just because they're liberal. One, he's a threat to their power because he uses Twitter and he goes over their head. Two, they're bitter because they called the election all wrong. Three, they don't have the prestige of access to the White House that they would have had under Hillary. Four, they are now the tip of the spear because the Democrats in Washington have no power, so they have to be the attack dogs. And then finally, they can't afford to have President Trump be successful. If he is successful and redraws the map electorally, then the Democrats are shut out of power for a very long time. And I think it's very disrespectful for the mainstream media to treat 40% of the country, who still has a lot of love and respect for this president, like they don't even matter. The media is wondering why we're so divided. Look in the mirror.
It's too dismissive.
The base is locked down. 98% of people that voted for the president in the primary still support him. 80% of Republicans still support him. He has positive feelings towards his handling of the economy and terrorism, two major issues, according to his reelection campaign. So look at the accomplishments. 1 million jobs created. Wages are up. The stock market's very high. MS-13's getting kicked out. He handled 2 hurricanes very smoothly. And ISIS is being decimated, and we haven't had a domestic terror attack so far, knock on wood. So all in all, you have Russia, you have Comey, and you have Charlottesville. To be fair, they were big stumbling blocks for this president.
How about Obamacare?
Obamacare, if you put that on balance with all those other accomplishments, there's no way a fair-minded person can say he deserves 91% negative coverage.
Yeah. And you know, Dana, there's a good point here, briefly, about the hurricane coverage. I think that was a turning point in some ways when people kind of, even to say that he, you know, that's a commander-in-chief.
Well, it's interesting.
2 hurricanes.
So this was done, this poll study was done in the last 3 months, but it wasn't done in the last month. And actually, if you just took the last week, he made a deal with the Democrats. The media should like that. The hurricane coverage, I wrote down, is great. He said he wanted to get rid of DACA, but actually he wants the law to pass. He said he would sign it. He also, his legislative director said today, he's not going to necessarily tie the funding of the wall to DACA, so the media should like that. There's fewer leaks, so the White House is running better under General Kelly. There's wins at the United Nations. You can't deny that. Economic growth was revised upward to 3% for the first time in many moons, maybe like 6 moons, I think.
Yes.
Tonight, the president is having a bipartisan dinner with members of the Problem Solvers Caucus. So all of these things a year ago would have been definitely thumbs down with the conservative media. So now, should the conservative media is like, okay, we're okay with all of that. Yeah. And the mainstream media, you would think, would actually appreciate those things.
That's a very good list you just made there.
It was almost as good as Jesse's, but half as long.
Yes, that is true.
To say it. Ice cream social. Ice cream social.
Let's switch over to the point that Joy Reid is making. I can't believe that she actually believes it, but what if she does believe that? If you're in that kind of bubble, that you believe that this is the worst time to be a human?
Have you looked on YouTube?
Yeah.
They're out there.
Yeah.
Like, there are people like breaking down, like freaking out. They're in their bubble of like misery and discontent, and they actually really believe it. I don't think there's a bunch of fakers out there. I think they actually feel like this is so upsetting. I don't know what's happening, what direction the country is going to. But guess what? There are also a large number of people that feel like, okay, guess what? Someone's finally listening to us and embracing the values that we love and believe in this country about the working class men and women that have been left behind. So there's plenty of things, refer back to Jesse's list of accomplishments and things that are actually going quite well. And if you're into like the numbers and you're into jobs and you're into the unemployment numbers and actually, infrastructure and things that are happening here, you can say there's a lot positive to point to, but you won't hear it in the mainstream media echo chamber, which just resonates with sort of this vitriol for the president and really will not have the, they lack the honesty to actually put forward what is happening that's positive. So a lot of people out there think it's all bad because they're not hearing it depending on what their news source is.
So let me tell you what I hear. So today I'm reading the paper, and it says that median income in the United States in 2016 was the highest in history.
Well, since 1999, right?
No, I think it said in history. Was it history?
I have a-
Oh,
I
maybe
think it's the
99.
10
19,
years.
previous
Okay.
record, yeah.
Okay,
99.
so I think to myself, wow, good news for the American middle class. But then I think, wait a minute, that was 2016. And Donald Trump was running, and this is picking up on what Kimberly was saying, and he was saying, hey, so many people being left behind, people are unhappy, blah, blah, blah. And I think, wait a minute, but we had the highest median income?
Do you know why? Because they knew Trump was winning.
Oh, they knew Trump.
Trump was
I
winning.
didn't know
And Trump
that.
had a psychological effect on the
Yeah.
wages.
Oh, is that what it is?
He had a retro effect. It's
Yeah,
happened.
but I think he
Made
plays.
that up.
I think he plays to anger and resentment, and then people, when you point it out, people say, "Well,
But isn't that
what?"
Joy Reid right now? She's doing that. She's playing to anger and
No,
resentment.
I don't think. In fact, what she said in the interview was very interesting to me. She said, "You know, Trump supporters watch Fox News. They're unavailable to her. She doesn't believe she can persuade them."
Right.
Well, I think George
She's on Fox
H.W.
right now.
Bush ran against, I know Clinton ran against Bush 41 and said the economy was terrible. Meanwhile, that economy was on the comeback trail. So, you know, both parties do it, but Trump will take credit and will, I'm sure, improve median income wages. To Joy Reid, you know, it's in the Trump era, you know what it's bad to be? A Democrat. Also bad to be a member of MS-13 or ISIS or someone who works for CNN. I don't.
Are you comparing her to ISIS?
No.
I just want to make
I'm
sure you're
saying
not.
That was
Those
weird.
things right now are not good things to be in the Trump era.
You know what? Though I would argue that it's a good economic model. You're seeing the success. Look, there are certain people that did really well being hypercritical of Obama. So why not? I don't know. I can't think of them offhand.
yes.
But
Well, also, everyone in media is doing better financially in the era of Trump.
Right.
So he's thriving off of the fights he has with the media, and the good news for him is that most people don't actually get their news from the mainstream media anymore. They're getting it from social media, and that actually, for better or worse, locks down the base. So I think that if Joy Reid had this interview to do over again, that's a line that maybe she said it flippantly, sort of like when there was that report that Donald Trump said the White House is a real dump.
Yeah.
I wonder if she actually, because I don't believe that he actually said that, or if he said it was in jest.
she said she often says this.
She might say, but also, so I read that entire interview with her, and because I don't know her at all, and I come away thinking, I actually kind of liked her. So she grew up in Colorado. Both parents were immigrants. She was raised by a single mom, but when her dad was there, he was a big right-wing conservative, loved Ronald Reagan. Her mom was a left-winger. So she has lots of praise for her single mom that taken her all over the country to see this great American country that she loves. Then what I also admire is that she was a journalist, straight up journalist. In 2004, she was so against the Iraq war. She wrote an op-ed. She got blowback from her employers about it. She worked for a TV station, I think it was down in Florida, and she decided to quit. And she started over her career and went into opinion journalism, which is where she sits now at MSNBC. And so there's lots of people can have opinions. I think that one line she probably wanted to take out of it. But she does benefit from being anti-Trump in today's media because she got a cover story and ended up being the subject of our A block.
That'll never happen to any of us. And she did it after flunking every history class. So I admire that.
Dana gave a very fair and accurate assessment of who she is and where she came from and her background, which I think it adds a lot to the story.
I disagree.
Well, what do you know?
I disagree. That's the end of this segment. So I win. Hillary Clinton's new book is finally out. One reviewer calls it dreadful. It's probably Bill. If you can't bear to read it, you're not alone. We'll have the Cliff Notes next.